to the Football Diary podcast. Just me and Dave this week, left to unpick a momentous weekend in the title race, and it's advantage Liverpool, which is sad for us to talk about, I suppose, Dave, as Arsenal and Man City play out, let's be honest, a very dull 0-0. We'll try and unpick it as if it was a tactical masterclass, but realistically, we were a bit let down by this game. Safe to say we had our fair fill of goals though. Newcastle and West Ham provided very well in a 4-3 win for Newcastle. We'll talk about Eddie Howe's men and what they might take from this game. And then have a look at the race for the top four as Villa and Tottenham both kept up ground with 3 points each, whereas Man United faltered once again, Dave. Sorry. So let's start with your City rivals. Manchester City 0, Arsenal 0. So it means in terms of the title race, well, probably helps Liverpool out more than either of these two sides. What did you make of the game, Dave? Was it a case of neither team wanting to lose, so setting up as safe as they could?
I think so. I wasn't surprised in a way of how Arsenal approached the game. I think they were quite clever in the way that they made their approach, and a little bit more defensive than probably how they normally set up. And they didn't actually display the naivety that they've actually shown in past years when they've kind of come into these games and been a little bit too open. And I think that's an encouraging thing for them, is just how actually solid they looked in defence. It was disappointing game, let's be honest. You know, we wanted to see goals for one. Wanted to see a little bit more of an attacking threat. I think Arsenal, didn't have many shots at all, did they? Had a couple of, probably arguably a couple of the better opportunities in the game.
Yeah.
And then Manchester City just looked a bit out of sorts as well. I've got some questions over their starting lineup, to be honest. I think Foden on that left hand side. I've always said it. He's nowhere near as good on that left as he is on the right, and obviously he likes to play a bit more central where he can kind of roam in field. But he was just completely knocked out of the game.
He was,
and the way that actually Arsenal crowded those midfield areas didn't help him at all.
And actually, I thought that was something that was going to be addressed in the second half. And I thought maybe they'd look at bringing on more threat down the middle anyway, because Haaland obviously was being incredibly well managed by Saliba and Gabriel. Had they added that second forward player, someone like Julian Alvarez, in to kind of play alongside Haaland and give the central defenders something more to think about for Arsenal, that might have been more promising. But I actually think it was a sign of neither team wanting to really go for it. City obviously had the lion's share of the ball, but I don't really remember them creating any chances of any real quality either. It was quite a disappointing performance from them. And I wonder, is this now a point that Arsenal will be really happy with? Was that worth it to go out and just try and get the point?
I think so, and I think especially it's the timing in the season as well. You know, we've not got many games left at all, really, when you look at the grand scale of things. I think they'll be happy with a point because they've got the run in now. There's still some difficult games to be played. Liverpool obviously play Man United next weekend as well. And obviously, we've seen what's happened this season in those two games that they've already played. Obviously, they're not beating United, so I think they'll fancy the chances of potentially dropping points there. And let's be honest, that Arsenal in this, if you could obviously speak to Arteta and the Arsenal squad, if they could be in this position at the very beginning of the season, they'd snap your hand off.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they've learned. I think they'll have learned from particularly last season, if they can be there or thereabouts with 4 or 5 games left to play, then it's all to play for. And I think that's the most exciting thing for us, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and Arsenal, I think over the last few years, let's be honest, have been quite humbled by Man City. And actually this year, they've taken 4 points from City, 4 points from Liverpool. It's a fantastic takeaway for this season. And I think it shows the development of this squad and that they really are up for the fight. So I think in that manner, they'll be really pleased. I think the fact that the plan was to just break up City's players as often as possible and try and hit them on the counter, and that counter-attack didn't quite come off, might be mildly frustrating to Arteta in the long run. If you miss out on the title now by a couple of points and it comes back to that moment where Trossard has the opportunity to square the ball to Martinelli, you're going to be quite frustrated. But there was a clear game plan with Arteta, wasn't there? And I think you were a bit frustrated by this, Dave, in terms of how the referee managed it. But was this a case of Arsenal doing to City what City love to do to other teams and just blocking up as many tactical fouls as possible? Because I watched this game with my in-laws who are Arsenal fans who were outraged at how often the referee was giving free kicks in Man City's favour. But let's be honest, it was a very clear tactical plan from Arsenal to not let City have too much time to create and just break the play up with those fouls, wasn't
Yeah, I mean, I had a bit of a rant on social media after the game because I just thought Anthony
it?
Taylor
As you often
just
do.
he did complete disservice to the nature and the spectacle as a whole. I thought it could have been managed a lot better. I think we
Mm.
we obviously as fans like referees to let things, try and let the game play out as well as it can. But
Mm.
it comes to a point when teams are making tactical fouls and there's stoppages every 30 seconds or so that you need
Mm.
to start giving yellow cards out because players just know that they can get away with these, with this fouling.
Mm.
And it was the case throughout much of the game. And I saw a lot of people saying the same thing, to be honest, that they thought Anthony Taylor just really should have kind of put his foot down for giving a couple of yellow cards out. Because Arsenal I think they had 20 fouls in the game, Arsenal. Man City had 9.
But do you know
To be
what,
honest,
Dave?
both teams were guilty of it. Both teams were guilty
Yeah,
of it at times.
but they always
Um,
will be.
Absolutely. And I think the one of the Arsenal had 2 yellow cards. One of them was for Ray and wasn't even for a foul. It was for time
Yeah,
wasting. So
yeah.
I just think you've got to put a stop to it. Yeah,
I,
and I can, and I did actually say, like, obviously they had this, brought up the notion of the blue card, which, let's be
mm,
honest, it's ridiculous. But I
nonsense.
think it's something that needs to be stamped out of football. I think tactical
Mm.
fouls it's just an ugly, it's ugly in the game for me.
Do you know what? There's part of me that agrees with you, but I think you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Because if the referee starts brandishing yellow cards every time, then all of a sudden the game gets away from you. You're making the whole occasion about you, and you're probably limiting one of the best games of football we could have expected. I mean, it definitely didn't turn out to be that way. It was an awful affair to watch. But I think letting the game be about how the two teams want to set up is far better than letting it be about the referee's decision. And have we also not criticised Arsenal for years for not having that streetwise way about them and that midfield that is willing to put the dirty challenges in and break things up a little bit? Is this not a sign of the evolution of Arsenal that the midfield's getting back to what we're kind of used to in the early noughties?
Oh, I agree. I think obviously as Arteta and the time that he spent with Pep Guardiola as well will have know full well that Arsenal have been guilty of being a little bit too nice. I think
Mm,
a little bit naive at times, and
mm,
I think they have developed a little bit of a nasty streak. I think the maturity of Gabriel, particularly this year,
mm.
is definitely given them a little bit more steel at the
Yeah.
back, and we've seen that. We saw it in this game. I thought he was very lucky not to get a yellow card at this game. He just went in so hard to a couple of these challenges, but it's what you like to see in these big games as well.
Mm,
Um, but I thought as a whole, it would have been nice. It was surprising to me just to see so many big players go missing. But Bukayo
mm.
Saka was anonymous
Yeah.
for the most part,
Yeah.
as Phil Foden was
Mm.
fairly anonymous. Haaland, just apart from Man City, seemed too focused on just getting the ball into the box. There were so many crosses, and
Yeah.
you don't normally see that from Man City. You don't
No.
normally see them going aerial so much in a game, and that's what they were trying
Mm.
continuously. It's almost like they were kind of out of ideas, and I think you have to praise Arsenal for that if that's what they're resorting to at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think Arsenal definitely nullified a lot of their attacking threat and stopped them from making those passes down the channels that they like to make, particularly feeding into Haaland. It was interesting. And Guardiola tried to roll the dice a little bit at one point, bringing on Jeremy Doku and Jack Grealish. And I know you wanted to look at Grealish in particular, and I'm always happy to talk about our boy. Um, it was an interesting one, wasn't it? Because he's obviously had a period out injured again. He's had a very stop-start season, and I feel for him in that manner. It's always going to be hard to come off the back of such an excellent season last year, where City won the treble. And Guardiola had a lot to say to Grealish after the game, didn't he? Now, me knowing Grealish in the way that I think I do as a player, I know that one of the things he really talked about moving to Man City was working under Pep and really learning because he wanted that footballing education. And he did seem to take what Guardiola was saying very well, I thought. He probably does listen to everything he has to say, but it felt a bit needless, didn't it, in the moment? And I wonder whether this is a sign of the beginning of the end for Jack Grealish at Man City. What do you think, Dave?
I don't know if it was frustrations boiling over, and he just took it out on Grealish at the time. To be honest, that's what it felt like because there was a little bit of an argument there between. I think it was Gabriel was having a bit of a mouthing off to a
Yeah,
couple of the Man City players, wasn't he? And
Haaland. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I did actually commented on Twitter last night, and it's just for me. I
X
think
Day,
when he
get with the
first
times.
on X, should I say?
Dave was on X, yeah.
And I basically said that I don't think Grealish is any better of a player now than what he was when he left Villa. I think he's evolved into a different player. He doesn't carry that fearlessness that he used to show running
Mm,
forward. So direct running with the ball at players. You don't see it anymore, and
mm,
he's just lost that unpredictability about him. And he'd actually mentioned it in an interview, hasn't he? Before, I think, in his mention about what Guardiola's obviously
yeah.
spoken to him about in training. He's gone through these periods of kind of almost being scared, not in that way of saying it, but being worried about doing something wrong that's not within his and Pep's philosophy.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and he doesn't get me on the edge of my seat anymore, Grealish, which is
mm,
really sad to say, because
mm,
when he had obviously that really solid season, he went through that period where we were just calling on Gareth Southgate, like, why is he not in your squad? And
yeah.
it just went so long for he was insistent in not getting him in there, and he eventually got him
Mm,
in there, and he came in the Euros. He came on. When he came on, there was a massive buzz around the stadium, so much excitement every time he's running with the ball. And he's just a completely
mm.
different player for Man City. He's not the same player for me.
Is it too lazy a link to just say Villa get into the Champions League this year and over the summer he moves back? Or is it too soon? Or do you even think that it's the sort of player that Villa need right now, what Emery would go for? What do you think?
Well, I said to you, I think they're missing something on the left hand side. There's just that
Mm,
balance. It's not quite there. And obviously, you've kind of tried to play McGinn off the left side of that midfield at times this season. You've played obviously
mm,
Jacob Ramsey as well, haven't you?
yeah, and
Um,
Rogers now.
the thing for me is he's been what at Man City is his third year now, 3 years,
Yeah, it is.
and he's been transformed into this player that he wasn't at Villa. Let's be honest.
Mm,
Um, you look at the stats that he had in that final year at Villa. I think it was 16 goals and assists.
mm,
Um, he's not in the league, that is, and he's not been. I don't think he's been relatively close to matching that at Man City. He
mm,
was seen as it's definitely the profile of a player. I would say he would have fit Liverpool or Man United better because of the way that they play
mm, mm,
in quick transitioning, obviously quick counters, attacking space, which
mm,
obviously Man City like to control most part of their games. So it's
mm.
they're in the whole part they're possession based, and I just feel as though his ceiling was so high, Jack Grealish, and I don't think he's ever going. I think the potential was that high. I think he could have achieved so much more on a personal level. I think he could have been such a better player than what he is.
I think that's harsh. I think he made the move to City. He's already got two league titles. He won the Champions League last year. And actually, I think it was quite influential last year. First season, it took him some time to settle, but he had a very good time of things at City last year. But I wonder if maybe for his own career, finding the right time to move on might be key. It's funny because the player he was at Villa, he needed to be that player. He was everything to that Villa squad. If he came into it now, he wouldn't be the only man there. It's a completely different atmosphere, and I wonder how well he would fit into that if that is something that materializes. I mean, I'll be honest, I'd snap your hand off. Of course, I would. He's a phenomenal footballer. We know
I
what
think
talent he's got.
I think the
I'd
difference
have him
is,
at
and
Harvey.
what we've seen at City over these last few years, there's not been an individual superstar. Obviously, let's be honest,
Mm,
at times there's been stand-up players, De Bruyne, David Silva.
mm,
It's he's almost been that Riyad Mahrez type of player
mm,
he's not missed if he doesn't play because they've got
mm,
another player of the ilk or the
mm,
sort of quality to come
mm,
in and obviously replace him.
mm.
And I just feel as though he would have benefited from a manager who kind of put an arm around his shoulder
Trust
and
him.
just actually show him, like, just say,
Mm,
do you know how good you are? Because I think
mm.
he was on the verge of that at Villa,
Yeah.
um, and
Well,
he's just
Smith
not
definitely
got.
did that for him.
He doesn't have the freedom that I think he'd like to
Mm,
show, and take
mm.
risks like he wouldn't like to, like to. I think in his game at City as
Yeah.
he probably would elsewhere.
Yeah, fair. Well, it's funny, Dave. We both said off air that this was one of the most boring games we've watched all season, and we were really disappointed by it. And we've managed to talk about it for 15 minutes. So I should probably move on now and talk about something a bit more exciting. Who knows how long we'll spend on that? Newcastle, whose shirt you're repping today, is that right? No, sorry. Uh,
Sorry, bad. Juventus.
Newcastle, Newcastle 4, West Ham 3. West Ham were 3-1 up and ended up losing this game.
Oh
And
dear.
7th versus 8th, it was an interesting battle anyway. And I think we saw quite how much attacking talent was on the pitch in this game. Obviously, for West Ham, Paqueta, Kudus, Bowen, they continue to impress. But this one was about Harvey Barnes, who was a bit of a forgotten man, Dave, wasn't he? What did you make of his impact off the bench?
Oh, that winner was unbelievable, wasn't it? That strike.
Mm,
Oh, out of this world. What a way to win a game. But I think do you know what, I'm really happy for him because he obviously he picked up that injury at a really unlucky time, didn't he, as well?
mm.
At Newcastle. How many injuries did they have in this game? Was it 3 more injuries they picked up? I think 3
Yeah,
players got
Lascelles has done his
ridiculous.
ACL as
It's
well.
just they're so unlucky.
Yeah, Lascelles obviously went off with what looks like an ACL as well. So that's his season done.
Oh,
And
I feel distraught for him. He's been so unlucky, hasn't he, over the last few years with injuries? Um,
yeah, and Almiron went off as well, didn't he? But Barnes coming back is huge.
Definitely, and he's obviously one who was given an opportunity with England, wasn't he? Obviously, in the last year or so.
Mm,
I just think Newcastle really needed this result. They've
they
really
did.
been through a tough time of late, and you had to worry for them at 3-1 down because at West Ham
Mm,
actually we're looking so dangerous. Um,
yeah.
the injuries that Newcastle picked up in this game, obviously when Dan Burn had to go back to centre back as
Mm,
well, kind of put them out of sorts a little bit in terms of their
yeah.
organisation. Um, but West Ham, all credit to them, they took advantage of that moment. I think the turning point for me was when West Ham took Mikel Antonio off at 3-1
Yeah.
because he was that focal point. He was the one
And
who was.
he was marshalling the defenders, wasn't he, and occupying them at every opportunity. And when you've got players like Paqueta and Kudus and Bowen behind him that you can bring into that play, Newcastle didn't know how to deal with that. As soon as he was gone, all of a sudden those creative players they've got didn't really have the outball, did they?
No, it was that outlet that was actually giving them a bit of breathing time because all credit to
Mm,
Newcastle, they actually didn't let the heads drop. When it went to three
no.
one, you could have easily they scored so quickly, didn't they? After half time,
Mm,
through Jared Bowen, brilliantly taken goal. Again, it's he's in such a rich vein of form at the minute.
mm,
Um, that it would have been easy for them to just let their game go. But
mm.
especially when they're at home, you always fancy them, don't you? And I think the atmosphere that the crowd actually it gives them a second lease of life, and I think that's what it
Yeah.
did.
The spirit in that squad is amazing, isn't it? Considering, like you mentioned, obviously the injuries they've had. Obviously they've had the issues with Tonali, which escalated again this week. I think there's probably a bit of talk about Eddie Howe and his future around this season. But to pull this result out of the bag, is this something Newcastle can kick on from towards the end of the season and maybe push for a European place?
I think so. I think that's what they'll be looking at. It's their
Mm,
consistency has been the main thing, hasn't it?
mm,
There's obviously been a lot of talk of the injuries and what effect that's had on them as a
mm,
squad. No doubt it has, but there's been a lot of teams in the league who've had an equal amount of similar amount of injuries,
mm.
perhaps not as severe, but we all have to deal with these issues at times. I think
Yeah.
they've definitely. I think they'll be able to carry on this form. They just need to just focus on the next game. That's been
Mm,
the key for them is looking for some sort of consistency in their games.
yeah. Yeah, getting through. The frustrating thing is they'll be without Anthony Gordon in the next game. So I think again he has been superb for Newcastle this season. It obviously took him some time to settle after his move last year, and he's just gone from strength to strength. Had an amazing summer with the under 21s. Is now in the regular England men's side as well. So for him to be suspended for the next game is unfortunate. What about West Ham though, Dave? I mean, you've been quite critical of David Moyes lately, anyway. They obviously put themselves in a really commanding position in this game. We can talk about their wealth of attacking talent. Mo Kudus is just a phenomenal footballer. But what went wrong for them? I don't really want to pin it on one man, but it seemed like the West Ham fans were quite happy to blame Calvin Phillips, wasn't it?
I don't know. What did you think? We've not mentioned it, but the second penalty. Have you seen it?
Yeah,
Did you see
but
it?
I saw it,
It's
and
unfair. It was
it's a
unfortunate, wasn't it?
shame.
It was
It's a
unfortunate.
shame, but it is a foul.
Yeah, it is
Like
a.
I don't, I don't know. Like I don't really know what else there is to add on to it. You feel sorry for Phillips because things just don't seem to be going his way over the last few months, obviously. So you don't like to see that given, but he did foul him. So yeah, the rule's the rule, I'm afraid.
It was just terrible timing, wasn't it? Really, and it was just such a shame that it was that man again.
Yeah, and the West Ham fans gave him a lot of stick afterwards, and he kind of bit back, which I always, to be honest, I always think footballers are entitled to do. Like, no one comes to my job and tells me how rubbish I am at it. I don't deal with people shouting and swearing at me on the streets. Just someone says something to him, he can say something back. Probably ill-advised right now, particularly when you're on your loan. You don't imagine he's going to get a great reception in his next game. So I don't know. Is this loan spell a failure for Calvin Phillips? Is it kind of worked out badly for him in the end?
I think it has, hasn't it? Well, I think we know that. I think.
What's funny is Southgate tried to give him a bit of a wake up call over it, didn't he?
Mm,
Because you know what Southgate's like. He'll pick you no matter what. And actually, he said Calvin Phillips' form has been nowhere near good enough. And when we're desperate for players in the middle of the park, I think that was meant to motivate him to go, right, I've got to really perform here. And then this performance followed.
absolutely, and I think it's definitely a wake up call for him. I think it's
Mm.
he's going to have to reevaluate in the summer. Obviously, he's not going to be at City next season, is he?
Mm.
It'll be interesting to see where
Mm.
he ends up if
If
Leeds come
Leeds come
back
back
up.
up,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's probably
That's,
a
again,
likely.
we've been a bit lazy, aren't we, Dave? We've said, let's get Greenish back to Villa, let's get Phillips back to Leeds. Who are United trying to get back? You'll
Oh
have
God,
anyone at this
hopefully
point.
not many of them. Um, yeah, it wouldn't be surprising to see him go back there, would it? Really, I think he just
Mm.
needs to get in a position where he's comfortable playing football, playing
Yeah,
regular football, because
yeah,
this all started for him not playing regular football for Man City. Went
yeah.
through all that um, with Pep Guardiola, got called overweight, which
Poor guy.
couldn't done any good for his confidence either. It's
Again,
definitely going.
thankfully, my boss doesn't tell me I'm overweight at work. So if they did, I think it might be a bit more accurate these days, but quite problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he just needs to get back to basics. If he can just find a team and be playing Premier
Yeah.
League football, because no doubt he's at that standard when he's at his best. Um,
Mm.
but I just thought when he went to Man City, I just thought it was a bad move from to begin with. I just thought it was a bad move.
So let's move on to the rest of the European picture then. Obviously, we talked about West Ham and Newcastle competing for probably Conference League football. There's still a bit of a fight going on for the Champions League. Spurs did it again, where they managed to come back late. It's very frustrating as an Aston Villa fan, trust me, but 3 points is 3 points for Tottenham. Let's focus on Villa quickly. It's a West Midlands derby against Wolves, a team that they've actually struggled to beat at Villa Park of late, and they got a pretty convincing, quite solid 2-0 win, Dave. Now, I don't know what you made of Ezri Konsa's excellent finish and his superb striker's instinct to lob the keeper. But as a whole, Dave, it was a fairly impressive performance from Villa, no?
Professional, I think, wasn't it? It
Good word,
was,
yeah.
yeah, professional in the manner that they went about it. I think they've had a couple of I think they've had a couple of banana skins of late in terms of things that have happened. Obviously, Ollie Watkins getting injured, obviously the week, and
Just what we need.
potentially we don't know if he's injured again
Mm,
now or whether it's
mm,
just precautionary.
mm,
But they're having to explore every angle of their squad, and that I think that's the main thing. Really, is they're actually um, every member of their squad is coming in and contributing, and that's
mm,
the main thing for Villa at the minute, is that they're actually being able to be consistent. And I think that was the question of them,
mm,
really, wasn't it? Did they do have the squad for it?
mm.
And so far they're answering those questions.
Yeah, the impact of the substitutes was fantastic. I thought Duran is brilliant to come on and kind of cause a bit of chaos, run at tired defenders, and disrupt the flow of play. And he did that incredibly well. I mean, you see it in the second goal. The way he wins the ball back is just excellent. And he tried to do it again slightly later on for his Zaniolo chance. Who again, I thought he was superb when he came off. I'm desperate to see him given a start. Probably not against City, but very soon I'd love to see him start a game for Villa because I think he's really finding his form now. The last few appearances he's made have been superb, I think. And Luca Dean as well. I think I
Mm.
like Alex Moreno a lot. system with him when Luca Deal is clearly the better left back at the moment and is in much better form. So I'm hoping that against City we see a back four of Consa, Carlos, Torres, and Digne. Absolutely. Now, Gary O'Neill had a few things to say after the game. He said he felt Wolves were a bit unfortunate because they had a higher XG. Now, realistically, we can put that XG down to the fact that Eight Nori manages to miss from about 3 yards out. And if he buries that, it's a different game, maybe. And obviously, Diaby took his goal incredibly well through a sea of players. So it's not necessarily going to have the highest XG, but that will have done him a world of confidence as well. World of good for his confidence, won't it, Dave? Because it's a player that I think started the season superbly, looked like he was really going to find his feet, then had a bit of a quieter settling in period, which a lot of players coming to the Premier League have, and now he's picking up again, and his numbers are looking a bit more impressive. Do you appreciate his goal? What do you think he's bringing to this Villa side at the moment?
Oh, I took it really well, didn't he? I think it's set up kindly for him, but sometimes it's almost a little bit. It's so easy
Too
to get
kind.
wrong, isn't it? I think
Mm.
in those sort of
Yeah.
situations, you can easily overhit it or just smash it straight over the bar. But I thought
Mm.
he showed like great technique, and the way he
Mm.
took his goal was. I think I mentioned to you, didn't I, early on in the season that would you be surprised if potentially he left in the summer, because it seemed as though he was struggling to get games. He wasn't starting games, was he? And I
Mm.
think with the start that he had to the season, I
Mm.
think we kind of expected him to just carry that form and be a little bit more consistent. Maybe that's just naive of us to
Mm.
think that way, because of when you're kind of acclimatizing to a new league, you're adapting. You forget actually that the Premier League is a completely different kettle of fish to obviously the Bundesliga. And
Absolutely.
I think
And can I just say though, leave it up to Mike and the edits to run that conversation. Because I said to you there and then, we saw the same thing with Leon Bailey. He needs that bedding in period. Bailey's obviously gone on to hit incredible form this season. I see that with Diaby as well. You can't write a player off that quickly. And actually, someone of his talent, you want to give him the best platform to shine. And I think Aston Villa is that for him. And I think he's showing that right now, along with a lot of the attacking talent in the squad.
I think what you say, obviously, in the past, I think you have struggled with your squad, your depth. I think you've had
Yeah,
numbers, but you've just not had the quality. And
no.
I think what you're proving right now is that your backup options and your squad rotation options, and they are vital members.
Mm,
They're indispensable in a way, in that
yeah.
you need all these numbers in who are going to fill in for when you have these injuries, because you've got your injury list at the minute is obviously not the best, but
Yeah.
players like obviously Diego Carlos has come in and
Mm,
obviously he's states a claim and played really well,
yeah.
and
Yeah. I thought it was excellent.
yeah, I thought he was too. So it's hard to, as a United fan, to praise, because we're hoping that Villa
We'll get
and
to that.
the Spurs are going to slip up, but we can't
It's,
even win
it's,
games, so it doesn't make any difference to us.
no, we'll get to that. It's nice seeing that much depth from Villa, and then remembering the next season you can add Emi Buendia to that, who was a club record signing at the time. Mings, who was club captain, will come back, of course. Boubacar Kamara, who's one of the best holding midfielders in the league for my money. Ramsey will be back as well. So it's excellent. And when Villa are looking to try and get into that Champions League, the depth is going to be really, really crucial. And how they hold on to that in the summer will be absolutely vital as well. Just a quick mention for Ezri Konsa. I kind of joke and he talked about his goal earlier. But if anyone deserves a slice of luck, it's that man. Because what a season he's having and what a week that was. Made his England debut and then got his first goal for Villa in what, 3 years, I think. So, do you know what? I'll take it. I think it's fantastic, and he deserves it.
He'll
He's
be
been
gunning for more
sensational this
now
season.
after that one. He'll be gunning for more.
But oh, do you know what? If he's going to play as a fullback more often, then let him get forward. He scored an incredible goal in pre-season, if you remember, against Brentford. He picked the ball up in his own half and just beat the entire team. And he tried to do that in this game and then ballooned this shot with his left foot, like nearly out for a throw-in. So I'm glad that this one worked out for him. Dave, you talked about Man United trying to catch Aston Villa. Well, they're definitely not going to do it if they put in performances like they did at the weekend. Has there ever been a more unfair 1-1 than this, where a team has snatched a late equaliser and actually it feels like that's still not enough for them?
Yeah, I mean, it was they were on the verge of winning that game somehow, and I heard what Gary Neville was saying about after the game and his sort of analysis of it, and it rings true. Like normally, you have a team that okay, you can play terrible, but you normally have a period in a game where you'll have a couple of opportunities, or you'll have a
Mm,
little spell, 5 to 10 minute spell. But
mm,
there was nothing. It was all one way
mm,
traffic. Brentford played
mm.
absolutely superb. I thought
Yeah, they
Ivan
did.
Toney just led that line so well, and the way that he really bullied that defence at times, and even the midfield when he kind of dropped in was able to hold the ball up so well. And United just had no answer for it.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because the kind of football Brentford were playing was really well set up to hit this United side, and the injuries at centre back really disrupted the flow. I think actually Maguire played very well when he came on.
Mm,
He looked the better of United centre backs that played, but it's very telling, isn't it, that one of these sides is still trying to hunt down a Champions League place, and one of them we've been talking about as a relegation candidate recently. But the brand of football Brentford played in this game was so excellent to watch. I think I saw a stat that they'd had over 80 touches in United's box in this game. That's only ever happened twice before in the Premier League. Both were Man City against low level opposition.
mm.
So how did Brentford kind of mastermind this performance? Because before we talk too much about United, they deserve so much credit, Dave, don't they?
I definitely think they exploited United in certain areas. I think they played that diagonal ball like superbly,
Mm,
um, and I just think United actually they really exposed in their midfield areas. We've spoken about it in the last few weeks that those gaps just open up too often in that United
mm,
midfield, and it was the same case again. They were able to exploit those spaces too easily, and United let
mm,
them, and they've let countless teams do that this season.
mm,
But Brentford obviously looked at that and recognised that was an area that they could really threaten in those spaces. And it was great to see actually Mbumo come on, and he's
yeah.
obviously come back from injury recently, and
Mm.
he looked a real threat. Um,
That one that he off the bar,
I know, yeah, it
that would have
was.
been lovely.
Yeah, they just had so many chances, and there was that many that many opportunities. I think they only had about 3 or 4 shots on target, but they had over 30. I think they had over 30 attempts, which just sounds
Yeah,
ridiculous.
ridiculous. They hit the
Um,
woodwork 4 times.
yeah, and they were really unlucky in this game. They should have won the game by, I think was their XG by over 3, wasn't it? By the end of the game,
Mm,
just showed you sort of the gap in performance levels between the
mm,
two teams. United weren't at
mm.
it, but Brentford were just so dominant in
Yeah,
all
they were.
aspects of their play.
You mentioned Tony and Mbeumo, obviously, and that's two really important attacking players that Brentford will need to get them through this back end of the season. I thought Johan Visser as well played really well, and the way that he is able to link up with Ivan Tony is sensational. I thought he was really effective in this game. What was interesting afterwards was Ten Hag talked about how Brentford wanted it more. And I hate when managers use that phrase because it is entirely up to you to motivate your team, and no footballer should ever step on the pitch not wanting to win that game. I don't understand how someone can want something more in that context. And I asked you before, Dave, when you look at these two coaches, realistically, who would you rather have at Manchester United right now? Who do you think plays better football? Who do you think's got a better future ahead of them? Would United be ill-advised to remove Ten Hag in the summer and look at someone like Thomas Frank?
I think he's a really talented manager. I think we've seen that over the years while he's been at Brentford. And I remember actually the first time I saw him was in I think it was the second season, the first season, their attempt to get promoted from the Championship. And I thought, do you know what, this team's really talented. I think it was when Ollie Watkins was still there, and
Mm,
they had a bite at the cherry to get promoted the first time, didn't quite manage it, and then the second time, and I thought, do you know what, this coach really knows how to set a team up, how to play attractive
mm,
football, and they really do.
mm,
And I think the thing with Ten Hag is that we know that he can't play the way that he wants to Ajax. We just don't have the personnel in that midfield to be able to play the way that it does in certain other areas. The technical ability of this team isn't good enough, but the fact that he perseveres to play in this way or try to play is kind of,
naive.
I'm lost to words at times that
Yeah.
we're still so open and still so easy to
Mm.
to get attacked,
Mm.
and we concede so many shots on goal that he's not got an answer for that. And
Yeah,
you've
absolutely.
kind of got to ask yourself the question: is that good enough? If you've not got an answer for such a glaring problem in that
Mm.
team, is that good enough
Mm.
for a Man United coach?
Oh, definitely not. I think it's interesting. I wonder if there are two small positives you can take from the game. Andre Onana, I think, had a very good performance, and I think that shows that he's really growing into this role. And Mason Mount got a goal. Good for him, obviously, to come back from injury and have that impact off the bench. It's a shame for him on a personal level that he wasn't the winner, but that's someone that you're going to need for this running, Dave, because you're now quite far behind fourth and fifth. Is there any chance of United catching either Villa or Spurs, do you think?
We've got to beat Liverpool at the weekend. If we don't, then it's done pretty much, I think.
Well, I think with
Well,
the way it
Chelsea.
is
If we've got
now,
Chelsea first, if we come through that Chelsea
yeah,
game, if we can beat Chelsea, we need to beat Chelsea. I think we've got
I
to,
think
realistically. I think we've got to win both the next two games. That's the way it's got to go.
I think I looked at it earlier, and Villa, if Villa get 9 or 10 more points, it would mean United basically had to win 7 of their last 9. They've Man United capable of winning seven
I
of the
think
last nine
I think
games.
we've got a game in hand over MU, haven't we? And then it brings
Yeah,
it to 8 points if we win that. So
yeah,
if we fail at the first hurdle, we may as well not bother because
yeah,
that's it. It's done. Um,
yeah. I think so.
that's as far as that's the way I look at it anyway.
Mm,
But I just don't have the confidence in them, and we've said
mm,
that so many times this season that
mm.
they've had that performance in them way too many times. How many times have I said that's the worst half of football, or that's the worst performance I've seen this season? It's
That's all of
just.
that. That's all our WhatsApp group is. I think Dave texted saying United are terrible.
But it's just the fact that not one player played well. Not one player
Mm,
really. Like you mentioned there, obviously, Onana obviously had to play well because the amount of shots that we had on goal was just ridiculous
mm,
again. Made some
yeah.
important saves at times.
Mm,
Mason Mount, yeah, positive. And you could see actually at the end of the game, when the game finished, he still smiled. I think that was a weight off his shoulders because that's his
yeah.
first goal for the team as well. I
Yeah.
think he was just happy to contribute in that manner and just kind of show his worth as well. Um,
Yeah.
I thought I thought Mainu, that was probably one of his worst games for United. That says a
Yeah.
lot.
He looked rattled, I thought.
But that
I
it
wonder if it was a
also,
bit much for him.
yeah, he also lacked support in midfield. Like he just had
Yeah.
it. He basically was running that midfield on his own. Like McTominay, I
Yeah.
don't understand why we put him as a second number 10 essentially, because Bruno
Yeah.
will kind of have a free role, won't he? Essentially,
Mm,
and then
mm,
McTominay is another 10.
mm,
It just doesn't work, and we've seen that.
mm. Well, maybe next year they will stop talking about Man United in a European context and we'll be putting them firmly in the relegation picture, which is where I want to look. Before we go, just as a quick overview, all of a sudden, Dave, it feels like it's opening up a little bit more. Probably for the wrong reasons, because we keep getting random points deductions dropped on teams. And there is talk, obviously, that Everton will suffer further consequences this week, but we'll cover that as and when we find out. I mean, they didn't do themselves any favours this week. 2-1 lost to Bournemouth with a calamitous own goal right at the end,
Oh,
which you really don't want to see when you're down there in the mire. We've talked a lot about Everton recently, and I'm sure we'll go back over them again and maybe question what Sean Dyche can do to get them out of this hole. Forest, they ended up with a draw thanks to an excellent header from Chris Wood. I thought it was superb for them out of the bottom three for now. And then Luton, we mentioned already, threw away a lead to the Spurs. But I wanted to just really quickly talk about Sheffield United and Burnley. Both are sides that we kind of had doomed to relegation already, and both will come away from this weekend feeling quite different, despite the fact that they both picked up a point. So obviously Burnley, with 10 men, managed to get a point to Chelsea, which I think still counts as a good result. I'm not sure. Like maybe a point to Chelsea is not enough these days. And Sheffield United managed to throw away a 3-1 lead to draw with Fulham after a sensational goal to wrap it up. Of those two, Dave, did you see anything that you thought might be able to pull them out of this relegation mire?
I think Sheffield United. I think their fans kind of are in acceptance that they're going to go down. I think that's the way it is.
Yeah.
I think it's getting to that point with Burnley, but the two performances that the players can definitely be proud of. I thought obviously Sheffield United could have gone 4-1 up. They had a goal disallowed, didn't they? in I think the 83rd minute, which which would have pretty much been game over.
Yeah.
And Burnley, another team who I think when they got, for me, I think that's a harsh second yellow card. I think that's
Oh, it's
really harsh.
ridiculous. Yeah,
Oh,
never.
and do you know what? Company is completely right to be so angry about that, because that's just something we don't want to see. And
Was it even a foul?
I don't think it was. That's the thing. I don't think it was a
I
foul.
thought it was bizarre.
So I was actually really happy to see Burnley at this point because I
Mm.
thought they played really well. I thought they deserved it. I think Josh Cullen's goal was outstanding. It was such a great hit.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
second goal, I thought the goalkeeper should have done better with. I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah.
he should have probably kept that out. But
Mm.
they're showing spirit, Burnley. That's the main thing. And I think there's a couple of players in there that are probably showing signs that they're actually adapting to this league. I think Odebear's looking really threatening at times. In the last
Mm.
few games I've
Mm.
watched Burnley, I think there's a real talent there.
Mm.
So obviously those. Obviously, company will be saying, let's keep going one game at a time. We'll see where it gets us.
Mm.
And if they need
Mm.
wins, though, that's the thing.
They do.
A point isn't enough.
I don't know though, because the standard of football from the other side is ridiculous. Like Luton are playing pretty good football, but keep losing like late on in games. So these 1 point here, 1 point there, they're slowly catching. And when we
That
don't know the state of
yeah,
Everton, it could be enough for Burnley. Is that
that
5? Is 5 points in 3 now for Burnley?
yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Though that I don't think any results at the bottom really did anyone any favors this week. And from
Not enough.
Everton, obviously lost, but
Yeah.
pretty much everyone else drew. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
think it was a miss.
Luton losing helps.
Yeah, I think they'll view it as a missed opportunity.
Yeah, potentially. And even though Cole Palmer seems to be trying to single-handedly play for Chelsea while his teammates just watch on in the distance. It was an eventful weekend, Dave, and it will continue. Obviously, there's midweek fixtures this week, and like we said, big news stories breaking in the Premier League every 5 seconds, it feels like. So we'll be back to talk about them all. Hopefully, we'll have Mike back with us next time as well. But thank you for joining us this week. Obviously, as always, we'll please to you to subscribe to us on all our platforms. If you're listening to this on an audio platform now, thank you so much. If you give us a follow on there, that'd be amazing. But also head over to our YouTube page. Plenty going on over there. You can see Dave's lovely face in this Newcastle shirt that he's repping today. Absolute Judas. And don't try and hide it again. This is the audio feature. No one's going to see it now, Dave. Leave it our radio one. But yeah, your support is massively appreciated as always as we grow this channel. But for now, I'll leave you to enjoy midweek fixtures, Dave, and hopefully they're all widen the gap between us and United.
Pleasure, mate. I'll see you next time. Hopefully, we'll be talking about 2 United wins in a row against Chelsea and Liverpool.
Thanks anyway, mate. We'll speak to you all next week.
See you again, mate.